Part 42. Infinite Doomsday Start Draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 411. When 8 cult masters sneaked to the front line, it meant that the combat power of the remaining rogue town would inevitably decline. Google search reading. The stronger the people who came, the more the combat power of rogue town would decline. As mentioned before, Sarah's control over the 12 strange Iron Man commanders was not perfect. She could actually control only 6 of them in a truly disciplined manner. There were 2 who were half obedient. This is what she thought. However, the mark in the Ruger system showed that there were 7 who actually obeyed her orders, and the other 5 did not listen to her orders at all. After the Big Dog helicopter incident, Ruger already knew that Libra Maria, Aquarius Isandra, and Gemini Li Min and Li Ji were all the strange Iron Man commanders who kept giving orders. However, the 4 of them nominally only occupied 3 places of the 12 commanders. It is easy for Gemini Saints to be 2 people. In other words, there are still 2 Iron Man commanders who do not listen to Sarah's orders. According to Ruger's deduction, one of these 2 people is Scorpio and the other is Capricorn. In fact, there is no need to make an inference, just take the command list in the System Ally module and cross-check it with the 12 constellations. However, there is another special person, that is, the one who Sarah thinks is not very obedient, but the one who actually obeys orders in the Ruger system. Taurus. One of the 3 earth signs, Taurus. All the air signs fled, hiding from Sarah, and were temporarily taken into Ruger's pocket. They finally became patrol scouts responsible for air alert. And the fire signs, earth signs, and water signs are the main forces sent by Sarah to besiege the town of Rogue and harass the cult. Yes, it is not only the 3 fire signs of Leo, Sagittarius, and Shepherd who participated in the ground attack on Rogue Town. In the subsequent harassment battle, the earth sign of Taurus and Virgo also joined the battle group. The problem also lies here. When Austin ran out of the city with a group of experts and prepared to use the teleportation array to teleport directly to the cathedral's crypt, the ghost side also started another round of harassment and attack. This time, Taurus and Virgo were responsible for the frontal attack. However, after losing 8 experts, the combat power of the cult remaining in Rogue Town was really not enough. Most of them were killed by Taurus himself in a few seconds. So, the problem arose. The reason why this Taurus, who was obviously recognized by the Ruger system, was considered not very obedient by Sarah was because this guy liked to get stuck in a rut when listening to orders. For example, Sarah ordered that you should be responsible for attacking a certain place in the next 2 days. Then, Taurus will really only attack in these 2 days. And Sarah's order to besiege Rogue Town this time was verbally conveyed by Shepherd. Shepherd is one of the 3 fire signs, and is not familiar with the 3 earth signs, but he didn't know that Taurus had this problem. The order she conveyed to Taurus was very simple: today you are responsible for attacking Rogue Town. There was no mention of containment, let alone what to do if the opponent was too weak. So, Taurus tried twice and found that the cult today was particularly vulnerable. He didn't say anything and directly flattened the cult. When Shepherd found out that something was wrong, it was too late to stop him. Fortunately, Sarah's earliest and most direct order was not to harm anyone except the townspeople and the paladins who actively attacked him. That Taurus brother did not violate it. However, the paladin cult's headquarters in Rogue Town, including the temple, was completely flattened by him. Countless members of the cult who stayed behind were killed and injured, and few escaped. Those who survived were either injured and unable to move, or had been knocked unconscious. When Shepherd saw that the situation had become like this, he didn't dare to stay. He hurriedly rode his fastest ground vehicle and rushed to the rogue camp to report to Sarah in person. She rushed to the cathedral in a ground vehicle, and was naturally discovered by the air patrol scouts and the Big Dog helicopter. Although they were all leaders of the 12 Iron Man, the 4 wind signs were not familiar with the other Iron Man. To be precise, they didn't know them at all. If it was just them, they might have to fight again. Fortunately, Ruger agreed to let Anya go on patrol with Li Min and the others in a helicopter. And Anya had seen Shepard. As Ruger's backup driver for a long time, she had heard a lot about Ruger and Sarah or someone else in the backseat plotting something unspeakable. So, she knew the relationship between Shepard and Sarah. Thanks to her, not only did a conflict disappear, but Isandra, who was sensitive to the situation, quickly realized that something was wrong from Shepard's words, so she took her on the helicopter and pulled her over. So, there was the scene now. After listening to Muang's explanation, let alone Sarah's face, she didn't know what to do. Ruger and Tia also looked at each other, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. It turned out that the reinforcements that the cult had spent so much effort to delay the time to wait for were not coming, not because they were too slow, but because they would never arrive. Half of them were killed, and half were beaten and knocked unconscious. Why did they come? To participate in the disabled sports meeting. However, Ruger was also a little curious. That Taurus was so powerful? Could he push Rogue Town alone? Even if there were no cult masters there, the average level of the people under him was only 25, and the highest level was only 30. But, the advantage of numbers is also an advantage. It's a pity that he couldn't ask directly in this situation. And even if she asked, the shepherds over there might not pay attention to her. Although the sheep-horned girl is loyal to Sarah, she is also a very proud person in her bones. When asked by Ruger, she might snort coldly, "It's just a small town of Rog. If it weren't for the order of Lady Sarah, I could have defeated it alone. What's so strange about that?" But she was completely different when facing Sarah. For example, now, she was so respectful to Sarah. If no one told her, who would know that she was a sheep girl? You have to think she was a sheepdog. After listening to her, Sarah thought about it and thanked her. If the sheep girl only had curved horns and no tail, or the tail was too short to be seen, otherwise the tail would be wagging to the sky. The shepherds were very pleased, but the Rogs who witnessed the whole conversation were not calm. Even if they didn't understand the language the two used in their conversation, they could tell from their expressions and their responses that they not only had a good relationship, but Sarah was also Muang's superior. Coupled with Austin's previous transfer, almost all of the Rogs stopped their fire support and looked around in confusion. Wanted to hear their companions' thoughts. Rog and Sarah certainly didn't care. But without their fire support, the three of them really had to pull more energy back to the battlefield. Seeing their changes, Anya on the helicopter was the first to quit. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai-Chi-Ji. Chapter 412. Anya is a dual cultivator of ice and electricity, and she teleported from the helicopter to the ground with a lightning-type teleportation. Google search reading. While scolding Rog, she also began to provide fire power support for Lugga and others below. If Lugga had not found that she was going to flash down and stopped her in time, she would definitely flash to the ground next. Lugga, but you need help. The little girl is in a very bad mood now. Although Lugga had decided not to let her participate in the final battle a long time ago, she still blamed herself for not being able to provide support for Lugga and others. Not to mention, her work as a scout on the helicopter was also unfinished. Who knew that the guys in the cult neither crossed mountains and rivers nor traveled through mountains and rivers, but used something like a teleportation array? She was eager to help, and Lugga had no good way to persuade her to leave, so he could only let her stay above to provide long-range support. At the same time, she also helped to pay attention to the surrounding movements. Although the Paladin Order in Rogue Town was annihilated, they can't recognize all the members of the Order. What if there are a few survivors trying to run here? What did you say? Hearing him say that, before Anya replied, someone in the Order got anxious. What town's order was annihilated? You are just talking nonsense. How is that possible? Did I talk to you? You just interrupted me casually. Ruger pouted and cursed directly. Besides, if I was talking nonsense, why are you anxious? You are so anxious, admit that you actually believe it deep in your heart. You shut up. The paladin raised his sword and shield and rushed towards Ruger. As a result, he was naturally blasted back by a grenade from Ruger. If there were no other people to help relieve the force, that guy's shield would at least become a sieve. Although he saw him repel the enemy with one shot, Anya above was still worried and immediately increased the intensity of magic support. At the same time, everyone on the helicopter tried to provide long-range fire support to Lugger and others from the air, but they all failed. So, they also found an opportunity to jump down and join the battle. There were 4 people on the helicopter. The pilot Li Min, the weapon operator Anya, the rear compartment pressure magician Isandra, and the passenger Muang. Except for Anya, who was still alone on the ground to provide long-range magic support, the other 3 were all ghost leaders, each with their own Iron Man armor, and they directly joined the underground battle after jumping down. Muang, who jumped off the helicopter first, also brought his own land vehicle and jumped down directly by parachute. After landing underground, she summoned her Iron Man armor, and the land vehicle was actually fused into the armor by her, becoming a part of providing fire support and thicker outer armor. When seeing the small vehicle, Lugger almost laughed out loud. Because that thing was nothing else, it was another small military vehicle that was known as the Zoo family's ancient and modern double cuteness like the Weasel. SDKFZ2, half-track motorcycle. As soon as he saw that thing, all kinds of keywords started popping up in Ruger's mind. Girl, and travel, and so on. Or space, fortress, motorcycle to armor, mecha creation and so on. Or ride my beloved motorcycle. He had a lot of random thoughts in his mind, and after the 3 Iron Man armors, Isandra, Li Min, and Wang, joined the battle, the underground situation immediately tilted towards Sarah's side. But at the same time, the rogues on the ground became more shaken by the repeated participation of Iron Man. Quite a number of rogues took a step back and left the battlefield to express their attitude that they needed Sarah to give an explanation. This caused Anya, who was also on the ground, to be furious again. Although Anya's performance was similar when she first overheard the true relationship between Sarah and Gaime. Of course, because Ruger had instilled all kinds of messy knowledge in her in advance, her ability to bear it was much better than that of the rogues. But, deep down, she still had some thoughts about Sarah's ghost identity. However, ghosts are much lighter than Andariel's reincarnation. After meeting Li Min and the other 4 and dating them, Anya no longer cares about ghosts. There is a theory that the character or behavior that a person can't stand the most is his or her previous stage. Because human progress is based on denying the previous stage of self. For example, the people who can't stand the behavior of elementary school students the most are actually middle school students. When they go to college, they think high school students are quite childish. After working, they will also think that college students are just a bunch of flowers in a greenhouse. Then ask elementary school students who they hate the most. Elementary school students have a long span, the seniors hate the juniors, and the juniors hate the kindergartners. Therefore, Anya hates the behavior of the rogues who suddenly hesitate after hearing a little secret. Opening their mouths and closing their mouths, they scold them for forgetting loyalty. Forget that without Sarah's leadership, they would not be able to successfully demolish the cathedral, and most of them would not have the opportunity or luck to survive. Everything they have today, at least half of it, was given by Sarah. What reason do they have to betray Sarah? Just because Sarah knows a few ghosts? Then she knew someone from the cult, why didn't she think she was from the cult? Not to mention, Anya's angry scolding was actually quite contagious. Quite a few rogues came to their senses after being scolded and joined the battle group again. Yes, some. But the rogues can no longer influence the battle situation. Because the combat power of the three Iron Mans cannot be underestimated. As soon as he made a move, he beat back the three people near Sarah. Austin, who was in the middle of the dispatch, had to yell and block the fierce attack of the three people for his subordinates. Rogues, these ghosts no longer hide their relationship, can't you come to your senses? However, with Anya scolding at close range, Austin's words had no effect at all. Probably because he found that there was really no possibility on the rogue side, he blocked another series of attacks and nodded sharply to a witch beside him. The witch flashed out first, and then shot a colorful and charming light ball with butterfly-shaped patterns around. Those butterfly-like lights really spread out like butterflies and flew everywhere. Ruger and others were a little confused at first, but they soon understood. The butterfly flew in front of a free Nephilim who was knocked unconscious on the ground, suddenly flashed a burst of light, and the whole body merged into the Nephilim. The warrior who had fallen to the ground and was in danger actually struggled on the ground for a few times and stood up again. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai-Chi-Ji. Chapter 413. Even those who had not been knocked unconscious but had just hid when they saw the situation was not going well, after being found and possessed by the butterfly, they all stood up again. Google search reading. That's not all. In the dilapidated corners of the first, second, and even third floors of the catacombs, which were thought to be deserted, many free Nephilim emerged. Especially, 3 witches actually appeared on the edge of the second floor. Regardless of whether they had fainted or were hiding, these free Nephilims gathered from all corners, looking like they were vicious enough to choose and devour anyone. Under the command of the witch next to Austin, these guys joined the battle group one after another, causing a lot of pressure on Luja's Hala. Basically, it succeeded in negating the advantage brought to Sarah's side by the 3 Tegamans' participation in the battle. However, this also has an advantage. Okay, those 3 witches on the second floor are the ones helping you set up the teleportation array. Taya pointed at the 3 of them and shouted. You actually slandered Kalia, you guys are so vicious. As soon as Tia finished speaking, Austin laughed. What? Did I mention that it was Kalia who helped us set up the teleportation array? Isn't that what your Roger said? You can't blame me. As long as you admit it, Taya smiled instead of getting angry, so, just don't believe a word of what you say. Anyway, even if you believe it and it turns out to be wrong later, you will throw the blame on the person who believed you. In order not to make mistakes, and in order not to take the blame for you, the best way is not to believe a word of your words, and it is best not to listen to a word of it. Austin also didn't expect that Tia could actually use such a method to draw out salary from the bottom of the cauldron. Looking up at Rog on the ground, more and more people came back to continue fighting. TCH, Austin thought for a while and realized that the presence of these Rogs would have little impact. It would be better to pay more attention to his own new force. But when he looked at it like this, he realized that these new forces were far from what he expected. Why are there so few people? Aren't there at least 50 people? Magdan, what's going on? The named butterfly magic witch turned around and pulled over a Nephilim who was relatively sober and did not need magic to strengthen her combat power, and asked Austin's question again. Sir, they are all dead. They were all killed by Andariel. What? Austin didn't need to be angry now. Which Magdan shouted first, they were all killed by Andariel? Didn't I not let you attack Andariel? Yes, we did not attack Andalil, it was Andalil who attacked us. With that person's explanation, everyone in the cult came to know how rich the details of the previous battle were. At the same time, it also allowed them to naturally shift the focus of their attack from Sarah to Ruger. After all, the clearest information they got from the narrations of the Free Nephilim was that that man had the ability to change the situation of the battle alone. Hey, that's too much. Why are you coming at me? Luger was still in the magic modified tiger style. Although the outer armor was still strong, it could not withstand the concentrated fire of the four religious masters. Fortunately, except for one of the four paladin types, the other three are all some kind of long range. The witch known as Magdan has a colorful butterfly brilliance magic. When it is used, the sky will be full of flowers and rain, and the danger is hidden. However, it is actually more severely restrained by heavy armor. After that, there was Natasha, Austin's Amazon personal guard who used a short bow to pursue assassination. And another male thief named Lyndon who wields a crossbow. Both of them follow the agility route, and their bow and arrow books are good and quite accurate. Although it cannot break the frontal armor of the Ruger Tiger tank, it puts a lot of pressure on fragile parts such as its tracks. But the person who put the most pressure on him was the paladin who was at the front. However, others prefer to call him Templar, sweet or spicy, instead of paladin. The Templar appears to be named Shay Cormac. Most people in the order simply call him Cormac, and some, such as the Butterfly Witch and the Amazon Guards, call him the Templar. On the other hand, the thief Lyndon always calls him Shay. The fighting style of this Templar Shay is indeed different from the paladins Ruger is familiar with. He was not using spiritual energy to supplement his combat skills, but charging forward, opening and closing. It feels like Sarah is chasing Andariel with a dragon spear. Under his pursuit, the speed of Luger's tiger did not drop to more than 40 km per hour. Running in circles on the 4th floor underground, I was afraid that he would shoot him and damage the engine. Except for the 4 men, the remaining Free Nephiid forces pose a much smaller threat to Ruger. Austin seemed to understand this as well, so he gathered together the remaining Nephilim, who were less than 20, and used them all to surround the 5 Tegaman. But even so, the 8-member team of the cult, 4 others including Austin, and the dozen or so Nephilim, failed to break through the blockade of the 4 Tegaman and attack the core Sarah. This is the first time for Sarashia to cooperate with Isandra and Li Min, but it is not the first time for Muang to cooperate with Sarah. Therefore, the 4 Tegamans in front of Sarah were simply divided into 2 groups. Isandra Li Min's master and apprentice were the main attackers, while Taya Shepherd stayed near Sarah to defend. With the help of the female necromancer Gialia who had been avenged, the fight was very successful. If it was just like this, as both sides gradually became familiar with each other's routines, the cult side with the advantage in numbers would still have the advantage. After all, it was 8, cult core, add 18, Nephilim, versus 5, Tekken, add 1, female necromancer, add 1, mechanic. However, if we add the rogues who provided long-range firepower support on the ground, the female mage Anya who practiced both ice and electricity, and the 2 barbarian teenagers Seongda and Seong-er who threw some heavy weapons from time to time, the difference in numbers between the 2 sides would be much smaller. When the cult side was familiar with the routines of Tekken and others, the rogues on the ground provided long-range firepower support, and they were also familiar with the routines of the cult members. When the upper side outputs to the lower side, you only need to consider accuracy, not defense, and the fight will be more comfortable. So, it didn't take long for Austin to feel the pressure increasing. He exchanged glances with the others and wanted to use some new methods. However, before they made a move, everyone felt that the rogues on the ground suddenly increased their attack strength. If it was just that, it would be fine. Ruger Underground clearly saw several 50 BMG bullets hitting the Templars, and at the same time, several arrows flew over. What's going on? Those rogues actually used bows and arrows again? What about those guns? Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai Chi Ji. Chapter 414. In doubt, he raised his head and looked at the ground, and found that the number of rogues there had indeed increased a lot. Google search reading. But those newly joined rogues were not Sarah's subordinates, but Akara's personal guards who left Rogue Town and disappeared without a trace because of Akara's death when Ruger rescued Minerva in Rogue Town. Yes, you. Ruger said. Lord Ruger, long time no see. The head of the personal guards also nodded to Ruger behind the layers of armor. They didn't have to see Ruger to know him. After all, the last time they met, Ruger drove a modified tank to bully people. So now seeing him still driving a tank to continue bullying people, the rogue personal guards immediately confirmed his identity. You, what is this? Ruger asked hurriedly. I'm here to help, the leader of the guards said. By the way, let me introduce you to someone. As they said that, they made way and asked a female spellcaster who looked like a priest and a wizard to come forward. Master, Master. Before anyone else spoke, the barbarian brother who was hiding near Anya and throwing an axe underground from time to time, not far from the female spellcaster, called out first. His younger brother next to him was also stunned when he saw the female spellcaster, and subconsciously hid behind. When he found that his brother was about to speak, he turned back to cover his mouth, but it was still half a beat too late. In the end, he had to walk out from behind his brother with a drooping face and greeted the female spellcaster opposite. Master! You two naughty kids, the female spellcaster snorted when she saw the two of them, her eyes wide open. We have an agreement beforehand. You can come here to broaden your horizons and help, but you are not allowed to come to the front line. Now, go back to the rogue military camp and take care of your two teammates. Ah! Master, you know all this. Seongda and Seong-er didn't expect that the female spellcaster even knew about this, so they didn't dare to stay. They said hello to Tiaruga below and the familiar rogue sister above, and turned around and ran to the rogue military camp. After they left, the female spellcaster straightened her clothes and looked at Ruger and said, "Excuse me, Lord Ruger. I heard from the rogues that thanks to your help, the two bad disciples can survive until now. I will bring their elders to thank you." "Oh, no need to be polite. After all, the two children call me uncle, so we are also family." It was the first time that Ruger saw such a polite Nephite in Roger Town, and he hurriedly replied like the elders at home. "What's your name?" "Ah, excuse me, I'm Irina, the witch." Irina the female spellcaster bowed slightly. Irina? This name is so familiar. Hearing this name, Tia couldn't help but take 2 steps back, as if she had triggered a long-forgotten memory, and covered her head. It seems that there was such a person among my parents' teammates back then. Yes, the Witch of Time, Irina. I remember it. It is said that she traveled to this era 1,500 years ago, a spellcaster from ancient times, similar to a mystic, a witch profession. What? After hearing this, Ruger looked at the witch carefully. She had fair skin, a tall figure, and light golden hair tied into a short ponytail, which was draped behind her in a handsome and capable manner. She was definitely a beauty. Even if she was not as beautiful as Tia Sarah, whose beauty became more and more stunning as her combat power and temperament increased, she could still be ranked in the top 10 in the entire Rogue Town. She was even stronger than Gialia Isandra and even Anya Lyman. Ruger even noticed that after her appearance, even several people in the cult were affected. The Templar Shay Cormac stared at her with his eyes wide open, forgetting to continue chasing Ruger. Such a beautiful woman, not to mention 27 or 28, is probably only about 20 years old. Considering her appearance and the time, if converted to the past, it is roughly close to the ancient Slavs in the Great Plain of East Europe before the Common Era in the Ruger world. An important descendant of the ancient nomadic Aryans, closer to the ancient Aryans than the Germans in the zoo. Although they do not age as fast as the Germans, They look like 30 after 17 and 70 after 40, but they will suddenly become very mature in their 20s. Considering these, based on the appearance of this witch, her physical age is probably only about 18. Say she traveled through time 1,500 years ago. How is it possible? Oh, wait, 1,500 years ago? Travel through time? And, Rog's personal guards? Ruggy seemed to understand something in a trance. Irina, ma'am. You and Akara. Well, we are very good friends, which Irina nodded, but I only came here about 20 years ago, so I am not familiar with your ex-wife. Ex-wife? No, just ex-girlfriend. Ruger understood that she was talking about Anya's grandmother, the ex-girlfriend who had just dumped him before he crossed over. It's almost the same. The witch waved her hand indifferently, with a bit of innocence in her words. Okay, Ruger didn't intend to dwell on this issue. Anyway, the more he talked about this kind of thing, the worse it would be. So Akara thinks I am. I think you were also sent here from 50 years ago, or imprisoned by some kind of time magic for 50 years, and only appeared recently. Before Ruger finished speaking, the witch nodded and said, well, most likely I got inspiration from my son. Although he had expected it, he couldn't help but take a breath when he heard her nod in acknowledgement. What's going on? Then me. As soon as possible, the witch looked at the cult that was still pursuing her, took a deep breath, and explained as quickly as possible. According to her, she was originally a servant of a clan master wizard during the Mage Clan War more than 1,500 years ago. The Mage Clan War is the origin of many mage professions, and even anti-mage professions, or the beginning of solidification. For example, mage killers, that is, assassins. Simply put, the mages once participated in the battle to defend the world of Sanctuary, and finally drove away the angels and demons, and then agreed with each other not to covet the power of the two, especially the demons. But one clan violated the agreement and tried to summon the demon again. This triggered a war between the mage clans. The master of the witch Irina was a great wizard who tried to summon the demon. After a series of unbearable encounters, Irina's former master died at the hands of her and her sisters. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Aichiji. Chapter 415. However, the old mage's dying curse was also cast on these servant witches. If nothing else happens, it won't be long before they follow in the footsteps of the old mage. Of course, looking back 1,500 years later, it is obvious that an accident happened. A powerful person who calls himself a prophet saves them. Moreover, he taught them how to fight against demons, and also predicted that there would be a catastrophe in the sanctuary 1,500 years later, and that the power of witches, especially Irina, would be needed to bring order to things. In the end, the prophet, whose true identity is unknown, puts Irina and her sisters into a deep sleep under a special time magic, and will not wake them up until they reach the correct time. However, when she wakes up, her sisters are dead, seemingly killed by demons. She also discovered that the world had become very different. After a series of adventures, she met Mr. Max and sensed the guidance of destiny in him, so she followed him into this world. Here, they met many other partners. For example, Tia's mother Leah, a Templar who is full of anger and easy to follow, or a thief who is careless and merciless. As she said that, the witch Irina couldn't help but look at the Templar Shay Cormac and the thief Lyndon, who were chasing Lugger's butt. Hey, I haven't seen you for decades, but you are still so beautiful, Your Highness. The witch, after Lyndon fired a heavy crossbow bolt, he said in a colorful voice while winding the bow. Irina, okay, long time no see. The big man Cormac's performance was much more interesting. For a moment, his face was filled with joy, yearning, guilt, and even a trace of resentment. Long time no see, Cormac compared to the Templar's complex expression. The witch's expression was much calmer, and, Lyndon. Until she looked at another person. And you, Sister Lisa, we haven't seen each other for a long time. I didn't expect to see you here. With that said, the witch Irina jumped directly from the ground and rushed directly to the companion paladin dressed as a witch next to the paladin leader Austin. Lisa? When you came to Rogtown, Irina had been missing for a long time. How did you know each other? After hearing this, Cormac didn't care to continue chasing Luch, and turned to Austin. The battle group looked at it. Huh, how do we know each other? We've known each other since we were kids. After someone revealed her identity, Lisa, who had been assisting the tall paladin, simply took off her witch robe and revealed her favorite clothes. A set of witch robes that were 80% similar to Irina's, except that the color was more blue. Sure enough, it was you who betrayed the sisters. Was it you who united with the devil to kill them? Irina used her impulse to hit out several black hole-like magic light balls, covering herself while attacking. Finally, she landed in front of Lisa, raised her warhammer with both hands, and hit her hard. Hey, you actually guessed it? Not bad. There is progress. That Lisa drew a whip with her backhand and fought with Irina. Could it be said that sleeping can really increase your wisdom? After sleeping for 1,500 years, your elm head finally came to its senses. Why? Why? They are all our biological sisters. Why can you do it? Why do you want to collude with the devil? Irina danced with a two-handed warhammer like a tiger, but it was no better than the light whip. Seems more bulky. Humph, it's all because of that bullshit prophet, that angel who doesn't dare to show his true colors, Lisa snorted. Without the prophet, we would all have died 1,500 years ago, Irina said bitterly. What's more, he was an angel. Tisk, 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 you are so unpraising. Lisa shook her head and sighed. I just said that your intelligence is a bit advanced after sleeping for 1,500 years, and you actually said such mentally retarded words. What's wrong with angels? Do you think angels are naturally good and demons are naturally evil? Let me tell you, this is a battle for hegemony that has no meaning and no justice at all. Angels and demons just belong to two hegemonies. All this is for power. That angel, that stupid guy, actually chose you as the most powerful one among the sisters, instead of me who is so much stronger than you in all aspects. I don't accept it. Celestial, he is just a clerk of the Angel Council, Angarisal, which has 5 archangels as members. You dare to call yourself a prophet based on the half-assed prophecy you got from taking notes for the council. What qualifications does he have? What? I heard that the witch Lisa revealed the true identity of her former employer without any hesitation. Not to mention the onlookers like Lucia, even her current employer, the Holy Knight Commander Austin, also revealed the true identity of her former employer. His face looked uncertain. There was even a hint of anger. S.E., Sarasil. Is this the real name of Lord Prophet? Irina was in a daze for a while. She didn't know what happened in the past, but she actually smiled faintly. Seeing this, Luigi felt that there seemed to be some truth in Lisa's sarcastic comment that her brain had become stupid after sleeping for 1,500 years. Of course, if he thought about it further, if Akara had insisted that Ruger was also a 50-year-old popsicle because of Irina's bizarre life experience, and didn't want to argue with him, he probably wouldn't be in the mood to complain about others. Obviously, Akara and his cronies didn't bother him, probably because they thought he was sleeping stupid like Irina. Or just say it clearly, they just don't want to argue with idiots. Well, someone had already vaguely thought of this, but just deliberately avoided thinking about it. Fortunately, Lisa over there provided him with material to stop the association. Do you only pay attention to this kind of boring things? Seeing that Irina was distracted by the prophet's real name, Lisa was furious and her offensive immediately became more fierce. That idiot, no wonder he chose you, because you are all the same, the same idiot. You are not allowed to insult the prophet. Oh no, Lord Sarahil, Irina said angrily. Humph, be careful that the Lord will come down to the earth to deal with you. Personally. Come down to the earth? Deal with me, Lisa laughed angrily. Ha ha ha, if you have the ability, just let him come. He is just an ordinary angel, he will die if he dies, and he doesn't even have the qualifications to return to the Chaos Realm to be reborn. You let him come to deal with me, ha ha ha, it's hilarious. What? Lord Sarahil, dead? Irina was dazed when she heard it. How do you know? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai-chi-ji. Chapter 416. How would I know? Lisa snorted coldly. Of course it's because he is me. Lisa. Austin suddenly stopped the witch's words, signaling her not to talk too much nonsense and to do business. The witch frowned when she heard this, but finally nodded obediently and stopped talking. However, her attack on Irina was more fierce. It was obvious that her anger was transferred to the sister who had a 1,000-year grudge. Although Lisa did not directly tell the truth, it was not difficult for the people present to guess, based on the information they had, that the angel clerk was probably killed by this guy. It seems that she should have betrayed the prophet and Irina a long time ago and turned to the devil. Then, it is very likely that in the World's Stone War, she, who was on the devil's side, found an opportunity to kill the prophet on the angel's side. Seeing that Irina and Lisa had entered the witch's internal fight and stopped the big revelation, the other people on the battlefield gradually resumed their rhythm. However, because there was one less witch, Tia simply took the opportunity to break away from Sarah and ran to Ruger to help. Of course, the purpose of her coming here was more to share with Ruger the past events that she had just recalled under the stimulation of the name of Irina. Or rather, it was a part of the knowledge that her father Max sealed in her mind. This part of knowledge contained the information of several masters that her father Max had collected at the time. In fact, it was not information, but just some beautiful memories of the past. However, due to some changes, Mr. Max decided to leave this part of memory to Tia as a treasure. Because several of his and Irina's former teammates rebelled. They joined the Paladin cult. For example, the Templar Shay Cormac, and the romantic thief Lyndon. Of course, there were some other people. It's just that those people did not appear in this 8-man team. Now, most of them have been hammered to death by Taurus in Rogue Town. Shay Cormac, the Templar Knights. The Templar Knights are the predecessors of the Paladins, or rather, the Paladins are a group separated from the Knights Templar. So that guy's fighting skills still have the original roughness and radicalism. Listening to Tia's introduction, Ruger couldn't help but mutter to himself. Well, this is another tragic story of a son becoming a father, and a father becoming a son. Because in his timeline, the Paladin was one of the 12 guards of Charlemagne. Wait, 12 knights? Another emperor? Why is it so familiar? There is a guy who pulls out a stone sword, isn't there also a 12 knights of the Round Table? That's right, that is the legend of King Arthur, the King of Britain, leading the Celts to fight against the invasion of the Anglo-Saxons. Wait, fight against the Anglo-Saxons. But the Anglo-Saxons are England, right? Isn't King Arthur an English legend? So, the myths and legends in Western Europe are so messy. First of all, the 12 close combat knights and the like all come from the same template, Joshua, the prophet who claimed to be the Messiah, the Son of God, and his 12 disciples. Later, as long as it is a king or emperor in the field of monotheism who claims to worship God and spread the glory of God, there are 12 warriors and 12 knights, which are all myths and legends made up by later generations. It is roughly the same as the Qin Emperor dreams of Black Dragon and Qidi kills White Snake in China. It's just that China has rich historical materials, and the people who care about these things are relatively more educated, so they can distinguish history from myth. But Western Europe. In short, to put it in the simplest terms, King Arthur was originally a hero in the legend of the Celtic Aborigines on the British Isles who resisted the Anglo-Saxons. But the Celts were eventually defeated, their country was occupied by the Anglo-Saxons, and their culture was absorbed and transformed, and their history was even more broken and incomplete. In addition, the Druidism believed by the Celts prohibited written records, and knowledge and culture were firmly held in the minds of clergy, that is, Druids, and passed down by word of mouth. So the legend can only be passed down in a fragment, which is vague. What King Arthur relied on the great wizard Merlin to survive various adventures. Many later English monster novels even respected Merlin as the ancestor of wizards or wizards. But Merlin's original identity was very simple. He was a Celtic druid. So his magical power would be mainly based on animal transformation and prophecy, which would be closer to the skills of druids in the mature fantasy system of later generations, and far from wizards, elemental wizards, or other magicians. And the story of King Arthur, if you believe that those ancient scrolls are real ancient scrolls, was roughly formed in the late 8th century to the early 9th century AD. I believe that friends who are familiar with the medieval history of Western Europe have already discovered it. Yes, this is the era when the Frankish king Charlemagne was active. It is even more correct. The 212 Knights are just a process of copying each other, novels copying myths, and deification copying novels. The second deification is not a typo. Charlemagne, or Charlemagne the Great are the same person in most cases in the Chinese context. But many correctors think that the man in Charlemagne means the great emperor, so Charlemagne the Great is wrong. For such things, it is enough to communicate. The reason why this person is so respected, aside from those overly eulogistic and vague words, can be explained in the most plain language. He, as a Germanic barbarian who once destroyed the Western Roman Empire, was recognized by the Roman Church left over from the Western Roman Empire and was crowned as the Holy Roman Emperor. From him, the once barbaric and ignorant Germanic barbarians, who represented destruction and degeneration, suddenly became the orthodox successor of Roman civilization. As a result, Europe 1,000 years later almost became the territory of the Germanic tribes, and the original owners were either natives, or became followers, or were destroyed and disappeared in the long river of history. Of course, it can also be said the other way around. It is precisely because Europe in later generations became the world of the Germanic people that such an ancestor was found in the pile of old papers and given various deifications. Because, before his death, this uncle made a will and divided his territory among his 3 sons. Among them, the West Frankish kingdom eventually evolved into France. The Middle Frankish kingdom eventually evolved into Italy. The East Frankish kingdom, after many twists and turns, finally inherited the title of its father and established what they called the reconstruction of the Holy Roman Empire, which was neither holy nor Roman, nor an empire. Later it evolved into the Zhou Kingdom, Germany, and Austria. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai Chi Ji. Chapter 417. Of course, their neighboring countries such as the Netherlands, Belgium, Switzerland, Luxembourg, etc., are also forces that simply went it alone in the long-term war and survived to this day. Why Charlemagne is called the father of Europe, it is particularly obvious now. This person is the real father of their Europe. If Europe only has Western Europe, then, Western Europe lets its father manage the father of Europe, and forces Eastern Europe, Southern Europe, and even Northern Europe to kneel down together and call themselves father. Will they be happy? Alas! A poor man has a short ambition, and a thin horse has long hair. Google searched can. Isn't this the current situation in Europe? Of course, Northern Europe is different. After all, the so-called Frankish kingdom was established by the Germanic people. The so-called Germanic people were not all refugees who fled from the Scandinavian peninsula in Northern Europe. Can you make a lot of money by recognizing a distant cousin as your father? Is there such a good thing? The Germans in Northern Europe said, "Hello, British, American, German and French fathers, Charlemagne is your father, and that is my grandfather." As for the Slavs in Eastern and Southern Europe, tisk tisk, this is why there is still a little fire in these two places that has not directly kneeled down. However, it will be soon. Back to the previous topic, the Knights Templar and the Paladins. The Paladin was the guard warrior who forced the Roman Church to confer him the title of Emperor of the Roman Empire in the late 8th century and early 9th century as the King of the Franks. The Knights Templar, as we all know, was a military unit established by the barbarians of Western Europe at the call of the Roman Church during the Crusades in the 10th century to support the Eastern Roman Empire and to fight against the pagans from the Middle East, North Africa, and other places. Of course, it is said that supporting the Eastern Roman Empire is the main purpose, and fighting against the pagans is the secondary purpose. In retrospect, it became the main purpose of plundering the wealth on the Eurasian continental bridge, and the secondary purpose of fighting against the pagans. What? Supporting the Eastern Roman Empire? Is this Eastern Roman Empire rich? Very rich? I seriously suspect that he was secretly colluding with the pagans and fighting together. The Knights Templar was established in this burning, killing and looting in the name of God. It is an economic and military entity with finance as the main industry and ocean trade as the supplement. At its peak, it was known as the richest in Europe. One legion could buy 10 home countries. So when the Crusades failed, the fate of this so-called knights was imaginable. This is not to say that the bow is put away after the birds are gone, but to divide the fat sheep. In short, relying on hundreds of years of burning, killing and looting in the central hub of the Eurasian trade route, the barbarians who had just taken off their animal skins and put on monkey crowns under Charlemagne have transformed themselves into the richest forces in Europe. These guys patted their butts and left after their failure. The victims who were burned, killed, and looted secretly accumulated strength and waited for the opportunity to take revenge. They could only, and would only release their anger on the Eastern Roman Empire, which was also robbed a lot and was getting worse. In the end, the Eastern Roman Empire also fell. I have to say that there is a saying in China that even if there are only 3 households in Chu, Qin will be destroyed by Chu. Europe probably also has such a saying, Rome is large, but it is not enough to fight against the Germans. Well, let's simply recall the background history, simple as hell. Ruger's complaint is easy to explain. In the timeline of his world, the Paladins followed Charlemagne, the ancestor of the Crusaders and Bandits, to conquer the East and the West, so they are naturally the fathers of the Templars. But in Tia's memory, the Templars are the predecessors of the Paladins. Isn't this another case of the father becoming the son and the son becoming the father? This kind of calling each other son and father is not new in the Anglo-Germanic world, and it can be said that there are a lot of them at random. What about Britain and the United States, Western Europe and Northern Europe, Frank Vikings, Norman England, Danish French, etc.? Otherwise, they can become big, bend and stretch. If you are rich, I am your father; if you are poor, please leave slowly, and play so smoothly. After complaining about Germans' past and present lives, Ruger also heard about the skills of the Templar Shay Cormac from Tia. Compared with the rich moves of the Paladins, the skills of the Templars are much simpler. From charge to taunt, from heavy attack to treatment, he knows several core skill types of the Paladins. But, in general, his changes are relatively few, and he is more stable. Although his burst is strong, it is really just a wave of burst, and he needs to rest for a long time to accumulate the strength for the next burst. As long as you avoid his high burst, you can basically beat him as a sandbag in the next 1 or 2 minutes. Then, Tia introduced the thief Linden. In comparison, this agile quasi-nephilim has a high frequency of burst. However, his burst limit is not high, which can break the defense of Ruger's Tiger heavy tank, but that's all. It is always said that knowing yourself and the enemy will ensure victory in 100 battles. Although Tia only provided information about 2 of the 4 people who surrounded him, Ruger was able to deal with their attacks with ease. Soon, he took advantage of the fact that the Templar Knight was distracted by looking at the witch Irina from time to time and gave him a string of modern decorations for his full body armor and steel iris shield. Tungsten alloy steel beads. From shrapnel. Seemingly finding that these metallic balls really matched his outfit, the Templar Knight over there lay on the ground with great gratitude, and directly put the shield on his head to slowly appreciate it. Well, let's just take it as it is. It turned out that 4 against 1 was barely a draw. Now that Ruger had an extra Tia, the order lost its most important front-line melee Templar, and the situation on the field was reversed instantly. Seeing his old partner fall to the ground, Linden, holding a heavy crossbow, immediately fired a series of bursts at the Tiger heavy tank, forcing Ruger to fine-tune his position many times. The heavy armor of the tank is certainly not afraid of being penetrated. Even if it can be penetrated, the after effect of the crossbow arrows alone cannot cause much damage to the internal structure of the tank. Not to mention that there was only Ruger in the crew, and he was wearing a full set of iron armor. Well, now there is an extra Tia lying on the turret, but her iron armor is harder than Ruger's, so she is even less afraid. The reason why Ruger hid was that he was afraid that the guy would use the crossbow arrows to damage the fragile parts of the tank. After all, the distance between the 2 sides was not far. And these magic side crossbowmen, although they could not strengthen the arrows and crossbows to the level of cannon shells, resulting in their absolute power not being enough, they could shoot those things quite accurately. Especially within 100 meters. 100 steps and shooting arrows, in the eyes of these guys, are just ordinary attacks. So when Ruger modified the tank armored vehicle, he did not pursue firepower or armor, but mobility. Whether it is the absolute engine output power or the relative transmission device, he wants it. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai Chi. Chapter 418. Power determines the maximum speed, and torque determines the acceleration. Google search reading. But the former actually refers to the ratio of engine power to vehicle weight, that is, the power-to-weight ratio. The latter refers to the torque at the moment of output to the power wheel, not just the engine torque. So the transmission device such as the gearbox is considered as important as the engine in many cases. The discussion method of military vehicles that need to stop and go on the battlefield and change the movement state at any time is not too different from the discussion method of civilian vehicles that need a few seconds to accelerate to 100 km per second. The speed reaches 100 km per second. At least, from the beginning of its appearance to the era of Ruger, no one would discuss the 100 km acceleration performance of military vehicles. Because few of them can reach a maximum speed of 100 km per hour. Torque, instantaneous torque, is the key to Ruger's ability to drive the chariot with a sense of turning and maneuvering. Facing Linden's crossbow attack, he only needs to slightly stagger a few centimeters, and a distance of at most 10 centimeters is enough. But with the addition of a shadow guard, Amazon short bowman Natasha, Ruger's pressure is much greater. Although the cooperation between these 2 archers who had nothing to do with each other was not exquisite, they were still able to fire an endless barrage of arrows with their superb archery skills. Combined with the weak but ubiquitous witch butterflies/poisonous moths, it really caused a lot of trouble for Ruger. He really squeezed his military diesel engine to the limit. Fortunately, he still had Tia. Tia's bullet fragments were fired one by one, directly restricting the witch's sky of poisonous moths from getting close. Next to Ruger, she didn't need to worry about the problem of ammunition for the time being. Those big pineapples thrown out were not less than the witch's sky of poisonous moths, which was indeed an exaggeration. Just saying that it was not much less than that was definitely not wrong. Those with small and more fragments restricted the poisonous moths, and those with large and fewer fragments were thrown directly at the three members of the cult. Finally, after another counterattack, she fired an anti-Nephilim fragmentation bullet, which hit the edge of Lyndon's armor and injured the thief's ankle. He staggered immediately and his rhythm slowed down instantly. Not good. Cover Lyndon. Shadow Amazon Natasha shouted hurriedly when she saw this, and quickly fired a round of arrows at Ruger. The firepower cover mission was done to the extreme. At the same time, the witch over there also increased the intensity of the poisonous moth summoning. For a while, those poisonous moths with the abilities of weakening, blood-sucking, and plague covered the battlefield like the return of Andariel's poisonous cloud before. They just wanted to make Ruger have no time to attack Lyndon. They succeeded. But, they also failed. Because Ruger dodged left and right, he had no intention of attacking Lyndon, but seized the opportunity to shoot an arrow-shaped projectile like shrapnel at the Amazon short-bowman Natasha. This thing is between shrapnel and armor-piercing shells. Unlike the latter, the projectile only has one shot, with great kinetic energy, but a small attack range. Unlike the former, which has hundreds of shots, the attack range is large enough, but the kinetic energy of a single shot is too small. Its projectile is a dozen slender arrow-shaped tungsten alloy needles. The kinetic energy of a single shot is still much higher than that of a heavy machine gun armor-piercing bullet. And the attack range can also be about half a meter in radius at a distance of 100 meters. The three members of the cult did not expect that Ruger would not attack Lyndon while he was inconvenient to move, but instead attack Natasha, who was the most flexible. As a result, he succeeded in a sneak attack, and at least half of the tungsten core arrows hit the Amazon with a special grenade shell. Two of them directly pierced her leather armor and penetrated into her heart. A master of the cult was about to die. However, Ruger did not relax at all and immediately began to reload the ammunition and prepare to make up another shot. Because there was no kill record in the system information, it means that Natasha is still a long way from real death. But, while he was preparing, the paladin Austin saw his comrade and partner lying on the ground, not knowing whether he was dead or alive, and immediately panicked. Natasha. As he spoke, he was about to rush from the half of the battlefield that was besieging Sarah to Ruger's side. But before leaving, he still looked around at his subordinates. Finally, he looked at another paladin and finally turned around. "Everyone, give your best," Austin said in a deep voice. "What?" Ruger thought, "What do you mean by giving your best? Could it be that your cult had not given its best before? You are still hiding it after being beaten to that state? You are lying, right?" However, the next moment, he saw Natasha, who had fallen to the ground before, seemed to have no movement, and stood up straight back in a lying posture. It was as if she was held up by a steel cable. When she stood up, her eyes flashed a strange purple-red light, and with it, her whole body began to swell like a balloon. Moreover, the flesh and skin seemed to have turned into a clay-like texture, reshaping her appearance. After a few breaths, the Nephilim archer dressed in Amazonian leather armor disappeared. There, a huge human-faced spider monster appeared. The spider looked like the legendary Black Widow spider, but it was many times bigger. And at the head of the spider, there was half of the upper body of a human woman. To be precise, it was the part from the waist up. The half-body female, needless to say, was exactly the same as Natasha before. But her long golden hair had turned white now. In addition, the leather armor also had a chitinous exoskeleton feel. In general, it was full of an evil beauty. If it weren't for the fact that she was smaller and the difference in strength was a bit large, I'm afraid some people would believe that this guy was another form of Andariel. Natasha turned into the Black Widow Spider-Woman, which was already a surprise to Ruger, but she was not the only one. At the same time as she changed, the poisonous moth which also grew a pair of butterfly wings. With the flapping of the wings, she gradually flew into the air. At the same time, the effects of the disease and weakness that her poisonous moths could spread before were also gradually spreading outwards with the flapping of her wings. Fortunately, except for the necromancer Gialia, everyone else on Ruger's side was protected by iron armor and was almost not afraid of that kind of thing. On the contrary, the free Nephilims who were half controlled and half commanded by her went crazy like chicken blood, and attacked everyone fiercely. But Ruger always felt that these guys had a strong smell of spent force. The 4 members of the cult on Ruger's side, the 2 women turned into Spider-Woman and Butterfly Lady, and the 2 men did not change much. The 2 people, one fainted and the other injured, just seemed to be resurrected on the spot, and stood up again with full energy. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai-chi-ji. Chapter 419. On the other side, Austin himself seems to have changed little, just like the Templars and thieves here. The whip-wielding witch Lisa, who was fighting against the witch Irina, transformed into a pair of bat-like wings and 2 devil horns. Coupled with the sheep's hoof-like feet, it looks like a typical devil. Taiwan Novel Network Rightward Arrow. She is also a succubus, or a menstruation-sucking succubus. But she is still not the one who has changed the most. The biggest change was the remaining 2 guys dressed as paladins. Among them, the big man who had previously paired up with Magdan, the butterfly witch, also swelled up again. But the originally fully enclosed helmet turned into a crown like a headband, revealing the ferocious skull face under the helmet. At the same time, his full metal gloves were also opened by the enlarged palm, revealing sharp white bone fingers. Skeleton King. King Leoric. As soon as Lucia saw this man's true appearance, they both called out his name. The strong man who was previously hidden under the paladin's plate armor was one of the key characters throughout the 3rd generation of Diablo. The father of a generation of warriors, the king of the ruined homeland of the 2nd generation, the grandfather of the heroine of the 3rd generation, and the true lord of Tristram in Rajkamp in the Tamor Mountains. On the east side of the kingdom of West March, the real king and former king of the kingdom of Honduras was demonized and corrupted several times and turned into a skeleton. However, he still has the power of Leoric, who is as powerful as he was in life. Well, it's better to be polite. Ruger thought. After all, this guy is Tia's great-grandfather by blood. If he really retains some sanity, finally abandons the darkness and turns to the light, returns to reason, and chats with himself and others about home affairs, Luge will have to call him great-grandfather together with Tia. However, having been controlled by several generations of demon gods, and now being dug out of his grave by Belial, the man behind the Order of Holy Knights, as a thug, it is unlikely that he has any sanity left. Leoric, the Skeleton King, is 8 feet tall and has an 8-foot waist. This is not the 23 centimeters or 31 centimeters version of the ruler, but the real 33 centimeters version. Although the waist circumference is not the width of the waist, and the whole person is not boxy, the waist circumference of a normal 1.8 meter person is only 2 feet 5. King Leoric does not look tall or strong from a distance. If you look closely, it looks like a small mountain. Magic Mountain. This made Lugger have to complain in his heart. The reason why this man is called the King of Skeletons is probably not because he can control all the skeletons, but because of his size. He is a king that no one can match among the skeletons. The biggest among the skeletons, so he is the Skeleton King. If it was unexpected and reasonable to say that there was Skeleton King Leoric in the Paladin Order, then the change of the last Paladin shocked almost everyone on Lugger's side. Because of his transformation, he did not just resurrect to the full state like Austin Cormac Linden, but there were no other changes, nor did he become demonized like Natasha the Spider-Woman, Lisa the Succubus, or Magda the Butterfly Lady. It didn't expand violently like Leoric's, revealing his true form. He has really transformed. Transformed into a Tejaman warrior. Capricorn, Shepherd, who is also Tejaman, shouted his code name immediately. Just as the last paladin in the 8-person team of the sect transformed into the Iron Man Capricorn, the witch Irina, who was fighting against the succubus turned Lisa, also let out a squeal. In the magic light, he also put on a suit of Tegaman armor. Scorpio. The changes on the field left Lugger stunned and at a loss. Although the whereabouts of the 12 Tygeaman commanders were now clear, Lugger's mind was almost turning into mush. To be honest, he had doubted that the witch would be a Tegaman. Especially when Lisa pulled out the whip, he really thought Scorpio was her. See, in Templar parlance, this guy showed up very late, joining the order only after Irina disappeared. Scorpion, scorpion, scorpion tail, whip, multi-jointed whip with poisonous needle tail. This correspondence couldn't be more direct. But who would have thought that the real Scorpio is the witch Irina who is rampaging on the battlefield holding a huge two-handed hammer? As for Capricorn, Lugger had met Capricorn before, when he was about to return to the surface after the battle in the enchanted dungeon. At that time, Launeokeo was flying a drone in flight mode to act as a scout for everyone. On the bridge of a huge centipede-shaped land cruiser, he saw 3 Tygamans from the Earth sign. Taurus, Virgo, and this one, Capricorn. So when the guy transformed, Lugger recognized him immediately. Although there were some changes in his Tegaman armor and on the bridge, overall it was still the same as before. The 8-member team of the cult has now revealed their true identities. Although the appearance of the leader of the Holy Knights, Captain Austin, has not changed much, Luke de Yasera knows that he is a descendant of Belial, the former king of lies, who was promoted to the cunning devil. His companion knight, the Shadow Guard Amazon Shortbow Natasha, transformed into a poisonous black widow spider. The deputy paladin, whose real name is unknown and codenamed Capricorn, defected to Tyjaman. His companion knight is none other than the succubus Lisa. The heavy paladin should now be called the Death Paladin, Skeleton King Leoric. The companion knight is Madame Butterfly and the witch Magaton. Finally, it was the Templar Shay Cormac and his partner, the Night Thief Linden. 4 of the 8-man team under the banner of the Paladin were indisputable monsters. This was nothing to Ruger and the others, but it was a mental blow to those naive rogues. Not to mention that among the other 4, there was a ghost wearing Iron Man armor. Before, the rogues were provoked by Austin's words to suspect Sarah and Shepard. But now, even Austin's own team has an Iron Man. He mocked others for colluding with Ghost and mocked Rogue for obeying Ghost's orders, but he himself was also with Ghost. Those rogues who stopped because of him before were now ashamed. Especially Anya was still up there. Seeing the changes below, she certainly would not miss this opportunity. She did not mock Rogue directly, but just made a sarcastic remark to the cult with Iron Man Capricorn as the core. Even so, the killing effect is quite strong. But in fact, Capricorn is not the only one who hit the rogues. Irina's transformation also caused a lot of killing. If all the rogues are counted, they are now divided into 3 factions. The first faction is obviously the youngest and the largest in number. They have won victory after victory under the leadership of Sarah, so they have sincerely regarded her as the leader of the young and aggressive faction. The second faction is the second largest in number, with the majority of the elderly. They are the conservatives who agree more with the older generation of rogues such as a Karakasha in their hearts. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 420. Obviously, the rogue guards are also members of this faction. The third faction has been attracted by the cult's Nephilim supremacy. They think that Akara is dead, and they are not convinced that Sarah is the new leader. So they might as well disband the rogue and join the cult. These people are called the Surrender faction. According to the character of the rogues, the third faction should not have much impact. In fact, their absolute number is indeed small. However, before Sarah obtained the Iron Man armor, especially the support of Lugger's lost weapon, the rogues were defeated and looked like they might be attacked by monsters at any time. In this case, except for the warriors with the most firm faith, others will be more or less eroded by this capitulationism. Even if Lugger appeared and Sarah directly pushed back to Andariel, the erosion at the beginning would not disappear so easily. If this kind of victory lasts for 1 or 2 years, and the next generation of rogue blood is injected into the army to dilute the corrupt old people, then these capitulationists may almost disappear. Even if they don't disappear, they will hide secretly. But now, time is still too short. In addition to those core capitulationists, there will still be a considerable number of people who retain the cruel memories of the failures at the beginning. Deep down, they are more afraid of monsters. They still don't have enough confidence in the strength of the rogue troops and even Sarah. These people are the main force of the capitulationists now. Moreover, once there is any news of unfavorable war, these people will take the opportunity to expand the spread of capitulationism. The unsteady people in the first and second factions will be transformed into the third faction at any time. This is why Austin's casual words and provoking the relationship between Sarah and the rogues can really make a considerable number of rogues waver and stop providing fire support to Sarah. But now the situation is different. First of all, the first group of young and vigorous people, who are the newest Sarah and the latter's base, have never stopped supporting Sarah. The second group of conservatives, they had stopped before, but with the appearance of Rogues Guards, especially the Rogues Guards who joined the battle after the Witch Arena took action, most of these conservative rogues raised their rifles again. At this time, those who have not joined the attack line can basically be regarded as the third group of surrenderists. If you ask why there are such complicated factional relationships among the rogue masters who came to support Sarah, this is also easy to explain. The first 7 rogue masters were all young and vigorous, which goes without saying. But after them, Rogue sent a second wave of masters of 10 to 20 people. If all these people are young and vigorous, then the masters left in the temporary camp will become mainly conservatives and surrenderists. If there are other changes at that time, Rogue's adjutant who stays there will be very passive. She doesn't have Sarah's appeal and absolute strength. The conservative surrender faction united to mutiny, and most of her core young and strong faction were sent to the front line, which would be a big deal. So when the second wave of reinforcements was sent, the adjutant could only add a little to each faction to maintain the balance between the two sides. When the strange Iron Man Capricorn appeared on the side of the cult, the reason why these rogues did not provide fire support for Sarah no longer existed. Even if Anya did not take advantage of the issue to put pressure on the surrender rogues, if they had not made up their minds to defect to the cult immediately, they would eventually come back to participate in the battle. Moreover, there should be no small actions such as working without effort, openly targeting the cult and secretly attacking Sarah. Of course, it should be said that no matter what the rogues are like, the current situation is that Sarah Ruger really doesn't care about their fire support. More of them is not much, less of them is not much. Putting aside the rogue on Ruger and Sarah's side, and the controlled Nephilim on the side of the cult, if we only count the core characters, the field is now really balanced. The cult has 8 people, 4 humanoids, and 4 monsters. On Ruger's side, there are Sarah, Shepherd Isandra, Leeman, 5 Iron Man, and the newly arrived Scorpio Irina, which is 6 Iron Man. It is considered 4 deputy commanders of the constellation, plus 2 non-staff personnel. After that, there is Gialia, a light caste undead, a strange existence who practices ice magic, necromancy, and holy light skills. And Ruger and his chariots, tanks, and artillery. There are also 8 people. Poor Anya can only serve as a commander of long-range support because she lacks the ability to protect herself in close combat in a narrow space. 8 to 8. But it is obvious that her true identity is exposed. After letting go of her hands and feet, the cult has a greater advantage. After the four monsters show their true identity, some skills that would expose their identities before can be thrown at will. The hell destruction spells of the succubus Lisa instantly became more than twice as powerful. If it was in the previous state, Irina would probably be injured by her after she transformed in 2 or 3 hits. However, she would also transform over there, and the transformation would be to the high sensitivity, high attack, and medium defense form of the Iron Man. To say that the defense of the Iron Man armor is medium is only compared to the bonuses they get in terms of attack and agility. But in fact, their defense is definitely not low. Just like the compromise grenade that Ruger used to knock down the Amazon short bowman Natasha just now, there is no way it can penetrate the Iron Man armor. As a result, in the previous battle between the two witches, Irina was slightly stronger, but now that Lisa has transformed and used her ultimate, Irina has an overwhelming advantage. If it weren't for the Paladin Capricorn who also transformed into an Iron Man to assist, the witch Lisa would have been defeated. But the fact that Capricorn could be distracted to help the succubus Lisa made the shepherd who was attacking this guy furious. The attack strength was immediately increased. The shepherd's Iron Man armor had some parts of the SDKFZ2 half-track motorcycle, so weapons could be hung on that part. Of course, it was also at the level of a World War II Zoo. After discovering that the medium-caliber machine gun was useless to Capricorn, the shepherd directly mounted the Panzerfaust anti-tank grenade on himself. Although the power of that thing was probably a bit, the speed was still a bit insufficient. Only then could Capricorn be distracted. Seeing this, the shepherd simply put aside his pride and called for support from the air sign Iron Man who had come with him before. After all, although Li Min and Isandra's attack method is mainly to release magic with magic gems, Maria and Li Ji in their team, like Ruger, also use Lost One's weapons. The Big Dog helicopter will carry their spare equipment. For example, the Gustav recoilless gun.